Now, it's important to note that someone else did get convicted in connection with the very crimes that Donald Trump was sentenced for today. That would be Michael Cohen. That's Trump's former longtime lawyer and fixer, a guy who spent more than a decade of his life by Donald Trump's side. Back in 2018, you'll remember, he was prosecuted by the Justice Department under Donald Trump. And he pled guilty and served time for facilitating the very illegal payments that Trump was, quote unquote, sentenced for today. Michael Cohen is Donald Trump's former personal attorney. He's also host of the Mea Culpa podcast and the host of the Michael Cohen Show on YouTube. You can find all of those where you get your podcasts and your YouTube. He joins me now. Well, Michael, I thought of you today because you did, you pled to in federal court the very, facilitating the very things that the former president and incoming president was convicted for before a jury of his peers. It was part of the sentence to which you agreed that you had to serve. Donald Trump was afforded these extraordinary protections, as the judge said, because he was elected the president. How are you feeling about it all?
Look, I'm obviously very torn between what I would have liked to have seen happen. Don't forget, I received a 6-year sentence, 3 years of incarceration, 3 years of supervised release. In my entire legal career, I've never even heard of an unconditional discharge. I was so confused about it, I actually went to ChatGPT, despite the fact that Judge Furman doesn't think anybody should go through ChatGPT, right? And I looked it up, and I was unable to find anybody in history who has ever gotten an unconditional discharge. Now, I think that Judge Merchan was judicious in his decision, and he was also, I think the decision was appropriate. I will turn around and say, however, that where I hate to say this, I agree with Todd Blanche, and I agree with Donald Trump in this. If there's no accountability and there's no deterrence factor because there is no repercussion for the 34 criminal counts, I don't see the point in having the conviction. They probably could have and should have just dismissed the case all, in and of itself. And I know a lot of people are saying, well, it doesn't make sense. Why would you say that? I don't take solace in the fact that Donald Trump is becoming the very first president or former president of the United States to become a convicted felon. I mean, if it makes people happy so that they can now call him the felon president, okay, that's on them. I still have a lot of respect for the office of the presidency, and I am a firm believer that to commit a crime and have absolutely no punishment, no accountability, no deterrence factor, I just don't see the purpose.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I hear what you're saying fully. It's also, when you talk about the unconditional discharge, part of this is so crazy is, again, you're a felon officially, right? Like, that label. That label applies to all kinds of people who've done all kinds of stuff, including genuinely horrible things and things that they were in the wrong place at the wrong time, or they made a mistake under the influence of a bad addiction. I know people that are convicted felons who are amazing people who've rebuilt their lives. And part of what's so crazy about watching all this is, like, we're in a country that puts so many people in prison. So many people end up doing bids young, with real trauma and substance use disorder, and not a lot of, like, mercy and forgiveness from the court, not a lot of, like, there's special circumstances. So it's a little tough to swallow in the context of one of the most incarcerated countries on the planet.
Yeah. We are known for human warehousing, which I like to call it. The thing I take somewhat offense to was really Trump's allocution to some respect, where he's saying that I was allowed to speak like George Washington, but I am not George Washington. Truthfully, I don't understand what he meant by it. It doesn't make any sense at all. But when he also turns around and starts talking about how he's unfairly treated and this is lawfare, the weaponization of the Department of Justice, it was actually his attorney general who was probably the most guilty of weaponization of the Justice Department. I was unconstitutionally remanded back to Otisville thanks to Alvin K. Hellerstein, removed from it because I refused to waive my First Amendment constitutional right. And I would love to know, I still, after 4+ years, have not been successful in getting any of my documents of the 486,000 documents that exist in order to turn around and to demonstrate how Bill Barr was involved and created this whole concept, as far as I'm concerned, of lawfare. So Donald is wrong when he says that this is the first time ever that this is happening. And of course, he's the martyr for the entire issue. He is not. I'm first.
Let me just play briefly a little bit of what he had said to you, which I also was so confused by. I was asking the producers beforehand to get the context. But here's what he had to say briefly.
And this is a man who's got no standing. He's been disbarred on other matters, unrelated. And he was allowed to talk as though he were George Washington. But he's not George Washington. He shouldn't have been allowed.
I will say you are not George Washington. That is a true statement. But it is clear.
I will turn around and say that my hair has definitely gotten gray like George Washington's as a result of this. But no, I am not George Washington.
Here's one thing that does stick out to me, and I'm curious to hear what you think about this. I mean, he's still pretty focused on you. You know, there's all this talk about an enemies list. There's talk about lawfare. There's evidence that William Barr, I think there's good evidence that the Department of Justice was essentially weaponized against you specifically, from Trump down to Barr. Certainly circumstantial evidence, if we don't have the hard evidence, but it appears that is a likely scenario. They're now promising.
Well, I think there's more. Wait, Chris, I want to correct you on something.
Yeah.
I think that it's not that type of evidence, circumstantial evidence. It's factual. They gave to me a document that does not exist in the system. It was a counterfeit document that they created for me. I've actually posted it. I've given it to MSNBC. It's a counterfeit document that required me to waive my First Amendment constitutional right and not publish my first book, Disloyal. When I refused to do it and asked them to tamp down the First Amendment constitutional violating language, they had the marshals there who handcuffed, shackled me, and put me back into solitary confinement, making it a total of 51 days. So yeah, I believe that accountability should be had, whether it's they turn around, they make Trump in under conditional discharge, make him go and even just serve soup at a soup kitchen or food to the homeless or to the impoverished. Make there some form of accountability. Now, but that's not what's going to happen.
Well, let me ask you this. So there's already a record here, right, of using the Justice Department and having you in his sights. They're promising this on day one. They're trying to get Kash Patel out of the FBI. Like, what is your expectation, your level of, anxiety or worry about essentially being targeted for unconstitutional and unlawful retribution by the government of the United States?
Well, it's why I actually put in a presidential pardon application, and my hope is that Joe Biden offers and presents me with the same pardon that he did for his own son. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I have been targeted by the Barr Department of Justice. That's fact. That's not circumstantial. It is factual. Judge Alvin K. Hellerstein himself acknowledged it was retaliatory, that he had never seen anything like it. I think there are a lot of people that are on this enemies list. I want to make it clear that from the very, very beginning with the Senate Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence all the way through this Manhattan DA criminal case, I have been subpoenaed to testify. And to be honest with you, based upon this unconditional discharge, to hindsight being 2020, if I knew back then what I know today, I never would have appeared for any of these. I don't think it's fair. I don't think that that's the way our system should be designed. I don't think that it's right that somebody should be above the law, despite that the Supreme Court has provided that presidential immunity doctrine, which again, to me, is confounding. But if I knew then what I know now, I never would have appeared.
Michael Cohen, who has spent a lot of time with a lot of lawyers, a lot of cases over the last after the last several years, making some time for us on this eventful and strange day. I really do appreciate it, Michael. Thank you.
Good to see you, Chris.